I always thought fingerprints were the ultimate security measure until my husband decided to use mine while I was sleeping. The notification from my banking app jolted me awake at 3:27 a.m., transfer complete, $247,893.42. My heart stopped as I stared at my phone, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Just hours ago, I'd fallen asleep next to the man I trusted most in the world, exhausted from a 12-hour hospital shift. Now, my entire life savings had vanished with a single press of my index finger. The worst part? James wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. I found him in his home office, calmly packing a suitcase like this was just another business trip. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that this wasn't my real bank account. And those weren't my real fingerprints. You see, working in the burn unit taught me something crucial about identity. Sometimes, the best security isn't the one you can see. My name is Dr. Sarah Chen, and after 15 years of marriage, I never imagined I'd be using my medical expertise to outsmart my husband. I'm the head nurse at Metropolitan Hospital's burn unit, where I've spent the last decade helping patients rebuild their lives after trauma. The irony isn't lost on me that I'm now the one trying to piece myself back together. James and I met during my residency when he came to the hospital as a pharmaceutical sales rep. He was charming, successful, and seemed to understand the demands of my career. While other men complained about my long hours and emergency calls, James brought me coffee during night shifts and listened to my stories about difficult cases. He even donated to our unit's rehabilitation program. The perfect husband, or so I thought. What I didn't know then was that James had a talent for playing the long game. His pharmaceutical company was just a front for something much darker. The donations, the hospital visits, even his interest in my work, all carefully orchestrated steps in a plan I'm only now beginning to understand. 3 months ago, I noticed something odd about a new patient's burns. The pattern didn't match his story about a cooking accident, and the chemical residue was unlike anything I'd seen before. When I mentioned it to James over dinner, just making conversation, I caught a flicker of something in his eyes. Fear? Interest? I couldn't tell, but it was enough to make me start paying attention. I began digging through old patient records, looking for similar cases. There were 12 over the past 5 years, all with the same unusual chemical signature, all written off as accidents. But what truly chilled me was discovering that each patient had been visited by pharmaceutical reps from James's company days before their accidents. That's when I started preparing. Working with burn victims teaches you a lot about identity and reconstruction. Every year, we help patients whose fingerprints have been altered or destroyed completely. Some see it as a loss, but others, those running from abusive situations or dangerous pasts, see it as a chance to start over. I never thought I'd use this knowledge for myself, but survival makes you look at your skills differently. I created 2 sets of fingerprints using medical-grade silicone, identical to the ones we use for burn patients during rehabilitation. One set I registered with my main bank account, the one James knew about. The other set, my real fingerprints, I used for a secret account where I'd been gradually transferring funds, disguising the movements as charitable donations to burn victim support groups. The final piece fell into place last week when I found the encrypted emails on James's laptop. He wasn't just selling pharmaceuticals, he was using his hospital access to identify potential targets for something called Project Phoenix. The chemical burns weren't accidents, they were tests. And now, judging by his hasty packing, it seems I've gotten too close to the truth. But James made one crucial mistake. He underestimated how much working in a burn unit changes you. When you spend your days helping people rebuild their lives from ashes, you learn that sometimes the best way to survive is to become someone else entirely. And thanks to my years of experience with fingerprint reconstruction, I've become very, very good at disappearing. The night everything fell apart started like any other. I had just finished a 16-hour shift dealing with a major accident victim, A young woman whose story hadn't quite added up. Third accident case this month with the same chemical signature. I remember checking my secure email before leaving work, sending encrypted files to a detective I trusted, just in case. Call it the nurse's intuition, but something felt off. When I got home, James was waiting with takeout from my favorite Thai place and a bottle of wine. Red flags should have gone up, he hadn't done that since our early dating days. But exhaustion clouded my judgment, and the wine didn't help. "Rough day?" he asked, massaging my shoulders as I picked at my pad thai. His hands felt different somehow. Tense. Like he was holding something back. That obvious? I managed a weak smile. Had another chemical burn case. Strange one. His fingers paused for a fraction of a second. Strange how? I chose my words carefully, watching his reflection in the dark window. Just unusual burn patterns. Reminds me of those cases I was telling you about. James's reflection smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. You work too hard, babe. Always seeing patterns that aren't there. Drink your wine. I took another sip but only pretended to swallow. Years of helping patients take medication had taught me that trick. When James wasn't looking, I emptied the glass into a nearby plant. Something about his insistence made me uneasy. You should get some sleep, he said, taking my half-finished food. I'll clean up. I nodded, fighting to keep my eyes open. Even without drinking the wine, I felt unusually drowsy. The Thai food. Of course. Amateur mistake. I made it to our bedroom, deliberately stumbling a little. Love you, I slurred, letting my phone slip from my fingers onto the carpet. As I fell onto the bed, I heard him in the kitchen, speaking softly into his phone. She knows. No, I'm handling it. Yes, tonight. The account numbers are ready. I forced my breathing to remain slow and steady as his footsteps approached. The bed dipped as he sat beside me, checking my pulse. Always thorough, my James. Then came the familiar sensation of his fingers wrapping around mine, positioning my index finger just so. I kept my eyes closed as the blue light of my phone illuminated the room. The banking app chirped its login sound. One transfer. Then another. A third. Each notification feels like a nail in the coffin of our marriage. When he finally left the room, I waited 5 more minutes before moving. My real phone, the one he didn't know about, was taped under the bedside table. With trembling fingers, I sent 2 texts. The first went to Detective Martinez, Phoenix is active. Evidence in Safety Deposit Box 647. The second went to a secure number I'd memorized months ago, Sunrise Protocol initiated. I could hear James in his office, packing quickly now. He'd find his offshore accounts frozen by morning, every transaction flagged and traced. The evidence I'd gathered over months, patient records, chemical analyses, money trails, was already in the hands of 3 different agencies. But I had to be gone before he realized any of this. I slipped out of bed, grateful I'd barely touched the drugged food. My go bag was hidden in the air vent of the guest bathroom, packed with everything I'd need to disappear: cash, burner phones, new identity documents, and most importantly, a fresh set of fingerprints. As I changed into dark clothes, I heard James's phone ring. His voice carried down the hall, panic creeping in at the edges. What do you mean the accounts are locked? That's impossible. Check again. No, you don't understand, I need those funds tonight. I slipped on surgical gloves, leaving no trace as I made my way to the garage. The moment I opened the car door, every computer in the house would receive a data wiping virus, erasing any trace of my preparations. James thought he was destroying my life tonight, but I'd been planning for this moment since I first suspected the truth. The garage door opener felt heavy in my hand. One press and there would be no going back. 15 years of marriage reduced to ashes like so many of the lives James and his Project Phoenix had destroyed. I pressed the button. The first 24 hours of disappearing were exactly as I'd planned. The second 24 showed me how little I truly knew about my husband's reach. I followed my escape protocol perfectly, ditched my car at the airport long-term parking, took 3 different rideshares using cash, and checked into a small motel on the outskirts of town under one of my prepared aliases. Everything by the book. But James, it turned out, had written a different book entirely. The news broke at 6 a.m. Prominent pharmaceutical executive James Chen named an international investigation. I watched from my motel bed as my husband's corporate headshot filled the screen, his practiced smile now sinister in the harsh light of truth. But it was the subtitle that made my blood run cold. Wife, Dr. Sarah Chen, person of interest in connection with patient deaths. My burner phone rang. Detective Martinez's voice was tight. Tell me you're somewhere safe. What's happening? James is claiming you're the mastermind behind Project Phoenix. Says you used your position in the burn unit to identify vulnerable patients, orchestrated their accidents, and laundered money through fake charity accounts. He paused. He's provided very convincing evidence. My hands started shaking. The donations. My careful transfers disguised as charitable contributions. James hadn't just planned for his escape, he'd spent years building a case against me. The fingerprints, I whispered. Check the fingerprints on the transfer documents. That's the problem, Sarah. The records show all transfers were authenticated with your real prints, not the silicone ones. And your special accounts? They're filled with payments that align perfectly with each Phoenix incident. I felt the room spin. James hadn't used my fake fingerprints last night, he'd somehow gotten my real ones. All those nights I'd taken sleeping pills for my insomnia, he'd had months, maybe years, to get perfect prints. There's more, Martinez continued. We found documents in your office computer detailing the chemical compounds used in the attacks. Your electronic signature is on every file. Those records are forged. They're dated over 3 years. Hundreds of files, all with verifiable metadata. Sarah, it looks bad. A sharp knock at my door made me freeze. Through the thin curtains, I saw shadows moving. Someone's here, I whispered. Sarah, listen carefully. There's a warrant out. I ended the call and slipped into the bathroom, heart pounding. Through the vent, I heard voices in the parking lot. Police radios crackled. Think, Sarah, think. I pulled out my second burner phone and powered it up. There was one person who might still be able to help, assuming she was still alive. Lily Parker. The accident victim from yesterday. The one whose case had triggered James's sudden action. I'd left her my card with a secret message written in UV ink, hoping she'd understand. The phone connected on the first ring. I was wondering when you'd call, a woman's voice said. Not Lily, older, more confident. Who is this? Agent Catherine Wells, FBI. Lily Parker is one of ours. We've been building a case against Project Phoenix for 2 years. She paused. Your evidence files arrived an hour ago. Very thorough work, Dr. Chen. Relief flooded through me, quickly followed by confusion. But the news is exactly what your husband expects to see. Right now, he thinks he's won. We need to keep it that way. Footsteps approached my door. The shadows had multiplied. The police are here, I whispered. Good. Let them take you in. What? Trust me, Dr. Chen. Your husband's not the only one who can play the long game. Look at your left hand. I glanced down. The cheap motel soap I'd used earlier had left a slight residue between my fingers. Under the bathroom's fluorescent light, tiny characters emerged, coordinates. When they process you, say nothing. Just wait for my signal. The line went dead. The door burst open. Police. Come out with your hands up. I deleted the call history, flushed the phone's SIM card down the toilet, and stepped out with my hands raised. As the officers moved to cuff me, I caught a glimpse of the motel's TV. James was giving a press conference, playing the part of the devastated husband perfectly. I never wanted to believe Sarah could do this, he was saying, his voice breaking right on cue. All those patients. I thought she was helping them. We all did. The officers led me out past a growing crowd of onlookers. News vans were already arriving. Everything was falling apart exactly as James had planned, or so it seemed. But as they placed me in the back of the patrol car, I remembered something from my years in the burn unit. Sometimes, the worst burns look deceptively minor at first. It's only later, when the true damage reveals itself, that you understand the full extent of the destruction. The coordinates Agent Wells had given me were still visible on my hand. I memorized them before rubbing them away: 40 degrees 26 minutes 47 seconds north, 79 degrees 58 minutes 36 seconds west. I didn't know what I'd find there, but for the first time since seeing that bank transfer, I felt something close to hope. The patrol car pulled away from the motel. In my mind, I could see James watching the news coverage, satisfied that his plan had worked. He thought he'd stripped away everything: my reputation, my freedom, my future. What he didn't know was that Agent Wells had just handed me the one thing I needed most: proof that I wasn't alone. Project Phoenix had burned other lives, and eaten other enemies. We were scattered, hidden, but not destroyed. And like the mythical creature itself, we were about to rise from the ashes. Through the car window, I watched the city scroll by. Somewhere out there, Lily Parker and Agent Wells were setting things in motion. The coordinates led somewhere. The evidence I'd gathered was in play. And James's perfect plan had one fatal flaw: he still thought he was dealing with the Saracen he'd married. But that woman was gone, burned away by years of suspicion and betrayal. In her place was someone new, someone forged in the same fires he'd used to destroy so many others. The patrol car turned onto the highway, heading toward the police station. Behind us, the morning sun was rising, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. Phoenix colors, I thought. How fitting. The next move was James's, but for the first time in this deadly game, I wasn't afraid. After all, I'd spent my entire career helping people rebuild from the ashes of their old lives. Now it was my turn. The coordinates led to an abandoned medical research facility on the outskirts of Pittsburgh. 3 weeks after my arrest, I stood in its basement laboratory, surrounded by evidence that would either save or destroy me. Agent Wells had orchestrated my escape during a prisoner transport, a calculated risk that made me look even more guilty to the public but got me where I needed to be. 30 minutes, she said, checking her tactical gear. That's how long until the FBI raid team arrives. James thinks his security breach alert was an accident. He'll be here soon to destroy everything. I stared at the laboratory equipment around us. The truth about Project Phoenix was written in every corner: specialized burn chambers, chemical synthesis stations, and worst of all, a wall of photographs, surveillance shots of every accident victim, including some I'd treated personally. He's here, Lily's voice crackled through our earpieces. She was running surveillance from a van outside. Black SUV, 3 vehicles behind him. Looks like private security. My hands trembled as I pulled on latex gloves. Where are the patient files? Second cabinet, behind the fume hood, Agent Wells directed. But be careful. The real evidence is. The power cut out, plunging us into darkness. Emergency lights kicked in, bathing everything in a red glow that made the surveillance photos look like they were bleeding. He's changing the game, I whispered, recognizing James's strategy. This isn't just about destroying evidence anymore. He wants to catch me here. Agent Wells drew her weapon. That wasn't part of the plan. No, I agreed, but it's perfect. The fugitive wife sis-awed in the act of destroying evidence. It would seal my guilt in everyone's minds. Heavy footsteps echoed from above. James's voice carried down the stairwell, smooth as ever. Sarah? I know you're here, darling. Let's talk about this. Dr. Chen, we need to move, Wells hissed, but I held up my hand. No. I need you and Lily to disappear. This ends between me and him. That's not the protocol. Trust me, I said, removing my earpiece. I know how to handle burns. Wells hesitated, then nodded. She slipped into the shadows just as James reached the bottom of the stairs. He was wearing one of his expensive suits, looking every bit the concerned husband searching for his troubled wife. The lengths you're going to maintain this lie are impressive, he said, stepping into the red-lit lab. But it's over, Sarah. The police are on their way. I stayed in the shadows, moving between the equipment banks. Funny. I was about to say the same thing about your lies. My lies? He laughed, but I caught the edge in it. I'm not the one who ran. I'm not the one breaking into secret facilities. How do you think this looks to everyone watching? You mean everyone watching right now? That made him pause. His eyes darted around the lab, searching for cameras. 15 years of marriage, I said, letting him track my voice. Did you ever love me, or was I just conveniently placed in the burn unit? Sarah. Answer the question, James. He sighed, adjusting his cuffs, a tell I'd noticed years ago when he was buying time to think. Of course I loved you. You were perfect, brilliant, caring, dedicated to your patients. The perfect cover. For burning people. For advancing medical science, he snapped. Every test subject signed waivers. They knew the risks. Like Lily Parker knew the risks? Something flickered across his face. Lily Parker was a mistake. She wasn't supposed to, he stopped, realizing what he'd admitted. I stepped into the light, holding up my phone. Say that again? The FBI's recording quality isn't great in basements. James's perfect mask cracked. He lunged forward, but I was ready. The self-defense classes I'd taken in secret paid off as I sidestepped, using his momentum to send him crashing into a lab bench. It's over, James. The FBI has everything, the real patient files, the offshore accounts, the chemical formulas. I've been working with them for months. He pulled himself up, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. You're bluffing. I destroyed everything. No, I said. You destroyed what you thought was everything. But I learned something important working with burn victims. Documentation is crucial. Every test, every procedure, every detail has to be recorded. Understanding dawned in his eyes as I pointed to the ceiling. Hidden in the emergency lights were dozens of tiny cameras, standard equipment in medical research facilities, recording 24/7 to a secure server. You didn't just document your experiments, James. You documented your confessions. Every private conversation, every meeting with your real investors. Years of evidence backed up and time-stamped. The sound of sirens pierced the air. James's face contorted with rage. He reached into his jacket, pulling out a small remote. If I'm going down? I moved without thinking, my body remembering countless emergency room scenarios. The syringe was in my hand and then in his neck before he could press the button. His eyes widened in recognition, the same paralytic agent his team had used on their victims. A taste of your own medicine, I said, catching him as he slumped forward. Don't worry, it's temporary. Just long enough for the FBI to take you into custody. The remote clattered to the floor as Agent Wells and her team swarmed in, weapons raised. Through the basement windows, I could see red and blue lights painting the night sky. "Dr. Chen," Wells called. "Are you all right?" I looked down at James, his eyes filled with helpless fury. The man I'd loved, who'd twisted that love into a weapon, was unable to move or speak, just like his victims. "No," I said honestly. "But I will be." As they led him away, I felt the weight of the past 15 years lifting. The next few months would be difficult: trials, testimonies, rebuilding my reputation. But for the first time since that late-night bank transfer, I felt clean. Purified, like tissue after debridement, ready to heal. 6 months after James's arrest, I stood before the Medical Ethics Board, my hands steady as I presented the final piece of evidence that would clear my name. The room was packed: colleagues, former patients, press, and in the back, Agent Wells and Lily Parker, both now close friends. "The fingerprints found on all Project Phoenix documents," I explained, displaying the enhanced scans, "were created using a sophisticated layering technique. When examined under UV light, you can see the artificial striations that mark them as forgeries." I paused, letting the implications sink in. "The same technique, ironically, that we use to help burn victims regain their identity." The board's decision was unanimous: full reinstatement of my medical license and a formal apology. But it was what happened afterward that truly marked the beginning of my new life. Lily approached me outside the hearing room, her burns now healed into proud scars. "Remember when you slipped me that card in the hospital? The one with the UV ink message? That's when I knew we had him." I smiled, remembering how that single act of trust had unraveled James's entire operation. "How's the support group going?" "Growing," she said proudly. "We have 15 Phoenix survivors now, all helping each other heal. But we need a medical director." Her meaningful look made me catch my breath. Later that evening, I sat in my new apartment, surrounded by unpacked boxes. The news played quietly in the background: James's sentencing was today. 25 years, no possibility of parole. His network of conspirators, including 3 board members from his pharmaceutical company, had also been convicted. My phone buzzed with a text from Agent Wells: "Turn to Channel 7. I did, and there was Alyssa, one of James's burn victims, speaking at a press conference. She was announcing the creation of the Phoenix Survivors Foundation, funded by the seized assets of James's criminal enterprise. The camera panned to show other survivors standing behind her, heads held high, their scars visible and unashamed. My doorbell rang. I opened it to find a small package. Inside was a new hospital ID badge. Director of Reconstructive Therapy, Phoenix Survivors Clinic. With it was a note from Detective Martinez: "Time to help others rise from the ashes." I walked to my bathroom mirror, something I'd avoided doing for so long. The woman who stared back wasn't the same person who had discovered that bank transfer in the middle of the night. She was stronger, wiser, scarred but unbroken. My new phone, "No more burners needed," chimed with another message. A group text to all the survivors: "First session tomorrow. Bring your stories. Bring your strength. Bring your hope." I typed back 2 words: "I'm ready." Because that's the thing about rising from the ashes, you never rise alone. James had tried to destroy lives in secret, but in doing so, he'd created something powerful: a community of survivors who understood that scars, visible or invisible, were marks of courage. As I pinned on my new hospital badge, I thought about all the patients I'd help in this next chapter. They'd come to us wounded, betrayed, looking for answers. And together, we'd show them what I'd learned the hard way: that sometimes the deepest burns forge the strongest bonds. The morning sun streamed through my window, casting long shadows across the floor. But I wasn't afraid of shadows anymore. After all, you can't have a phoenix without the fire, and you can't have healing without the hurt. I was ready to help others find their way through both. If this story touched your heart, remember that there are real survivors out there fighting similar battles every day. People who have risen from their ashes, transformed their pain into purpose, and found strength in helping others heal. Your support matters more than you know. Hit that like button to help this story reach others who might need to hear its message of resilience and redemption. Subscribe to channel name for more powerful true stories that remind us of the incredible strength of the human spirit. Want to make a difference? Share this video with someone who needs encouragement today. Every share could be the spark that helps another person find their inner phoenix. Remember, sometimes the deepest betrayals can lead to the most powerful transformations. Trust your instincts, document everything, and never be afraid to rise from the ashes of your old life.